This is my 2017 Yamaha TTR 230 that I just picked up for only $700. And you're about to see how I took this cheap, non-running dirt bike and turned it into a huge profit. Not only is this bike really dirty, but it has a laundry list of issues that we're going to have to correct. This bike has a busted up and really sticky throttle tube, a massive fuel leak, and worst of all, the electric start does not work at all. So hopping right in and getting this thing back up and going, the first thing that we're going to knock out is this carburetor. Even though the electric start doesn't even work to try to start this bike, I know that it doesn't run at all because I tried to bump start it when I went to go buy the bike. In addition to not being able to bump start this bike with the clutch, the previous owner said that it had been sitting for at least 4 years. So we know whatever's in this carburetor and this fuel tank has to go. Thankfully, cleaning out carburetors on these bikes is super simple, and I'm going to walk you through the exact process right now. Just saw me remove the fuel line and the 2 screws holding these intake boots on. So now, as you can see, this carburetor has a little bit of wiggle room. Now remove your seat and fuel tank and end up with something just like this. Both the seat and fuel tank are only held on by a couple bolts each, so they're super easy to remove. Here I am simply loosening the nut that holds these throttle cables in place so that we can get them out of the way. Although this bike does have 2 cables running to this carburetor and is slightly different than most air-cooled trail bikes you'll see, the removal of this is still really simple. So just make sure that you make note of where things are when you take them off, and then just put them back on the exact same way. With both of our throttle cables securely out of the way, we can go ahead and wiggle this carburetor free as there's now nothing else holding it on. This can be a little tricky sometimes because of some tight clearances in there, but just move the rear boot out of the way and that'll help you a lot. And now once you get it wiggled out, we can go ahead and take it over to our workbench and start pulling this thing apart. The first step to pulling these carburetors apart is getting the bowl removed from the bottom. And 99 times out of 100, these are held on by 4 screws. Now, something really important that you need to keep in mind is that although these screws look like they're Phillips head screws, they are not. If you use a Phillips head screwdriver and these things are too tight, just like this bike was, you will definitely strip them out. And that's because these screws are actually JIS screws, or Japanese Industrial Standard. I'm not saying that it's impossible to remove these things with a Phillips head screwdriver. All I'm saying is that ever since I bought this JIS screwdriver set off of Amazon, I have not stripped out a screw since using these things. So if you regularly work on bikes or you think you might be pulling a carburetor apart in the near future, I would definitely go buy these things off of Amazon, and I've linked them down in the description below to make it super easy for you guys. And this is a cheap set and I've had 0 issues out of them. With all 4 of our bowl screws removed, we should be able to remove the bowl from this carburetor. But as you can see, I was really struggling with this thing as it was really stuck on. Having a little bit of a seized bowl is pretty normal on a bike that's been sitting for as long as this one has. So as you can see, you can take a screwdriver and gently tap the bowl, which should help it pop right off. Also, if you take a peek down in the bottom of this bowl, you can see a bunch of green sediment, so I'm really glad that we're cleaning this thing out. With our bowl completely removed, we need to go ahead and get the jets pulled out of this thing and let them soak in our ChemDip carburetor parts cleaner. Removing jets are super simple. As you can see, the large one comes out with a wrench, and the other 2 are going to come out with a small flathead screwdriver. This is also a good time to go ahead and remove the float and the needle valve, and you do this by removing the wrist pin that holds it in, and then simply pull the needle valve out of the back of the carburetor. Since that valve has rubber components though, I don't let it sit and soak in our carburetor parts cleaner, and instead I gently spray it down with some carb cleaner and brush it with a very soft bristle brush as well as a clean microfiber towel. After letting our jets soak in this cleaner for about an hour to really loosen up that hard sediment, it's time for us to pull them out and get them cleaned off. Most of the time, after allowing these jets to soak, they'll simply spray clean with some aerosol carburetor cleaner. I not only sprayed on the outside of the jets with this stuff, but also try to spray through the jet with this, as it'll help you see the spray pattern and also help loosen up anything that is stuck down inside. This is also a great time to spray down the carburetor as a whole with this aerosol cleaner, as it's really important to make sure all the passageways in this thing are clean and will allow us to have proper flow of both air and fuel. Before reinstalling these jets, as an extra safety measure, I want to go ahead and make sure we brush out the inside of the jets to make sure that no sediment is left behind. This is another awesome carburetor cleaning tool that I found on Amazon that I use almost every time that I clean a carburetor. This cleaning set has an assorted size that will fit almost any jet, and I've gone ahead and linked this down in the description below, so if you want to get some of these, they're down there available for you as well. Another safety measure you can implement to make sure that these things are clean is spraying some simple compressed air through the jets. This aerosol compressed air with the straw is super handy for this, and it's an extra safety measure that'll help make sure that you don't have any issues after you put this thing back together. Take a look at this main jet after running these brushes through and then hitting it with this compressed air, and see how clean this thing is and how easy it is to see all the way through it. That's what you want to see with all your jets. And then once you have that, we're good to go ahead and reinstall. Reinstallation of these jets is just as simple as removing them, and there's no special steps that you need to take. Simply just put them back where you pulled them out of. One thing to note though is don't go overboard with the tightening, as if you tighten too hard on these little brass jets, you run the risk of stripping or chipping the end of them. Additionally, your largest jet may sometimes utilize a rubber O-ring, and if it's anything like mine, it was completely dry rotted and cracked, so I went ahead and threw on a new one out of an assortment set. I don't buy anything special at all for these O-rings. I simply went down to Harbor Freight and found a universal set of O-rings that come in various sizes that say that they're safe to use around gasoline. Once all your jets are reinstalled, you can go ahead and replace the float bowl, and you want to be very careful when you reinstall the screws that hold the bowl down, and do not over tighten these as you run the risk of stripping them out, and when these things are stripped out, they're super hard to remove. Even if you're very confident that you've cleaned this carburetor perfectly and will not have to take this bolt off again anytime soon, someone down the line will have to remove it again, and you want to make sure that you help take care of that person in hopes that someone will one day help take care of you. That's why anytime you work on something like this that you're about to pass on to someone else or keep for yourself, you want to make sure that you do everything right so that down the road you don't cause any issues. With our carburetor fully reassembled, it's time to go ahead and throw this thing back on the bike. I started off by reattaching the ends of our throttle cables back to the assembly on the carburetor, as it's much simpler to do this while it's out and you can finagle it around however you may need. So I had the ends of these cables reattached. I went ahead and tested out our throttle assembly and made sure that it worked. With this confirmed, you can go ahead and start seating each end of the carburetor into its respective intake boot, which can sometimes be a little tricky and a little bit frustrating, so make sure you take your time and get these things fully seated, because you definitely want to make sure that you don't have a leak on either of your intake boots. With both boots fully seated and the carburetor held firmly in place, you can go ahead and tighten down this throttle assembly so that your cables don't move around. Once complete, test out your throttle one more time and make sure everything moves as expected. If so, go ahead and tighten down both band clamps on your intake boots, and then we can move to the next problem, getting our fuel tank sorted out. With any gas vehicle that's been sitting for a long period of time, you don't even want to try to start these things up without first getting rid of this old fuel that's in the fuel tank and replacing it with something fresh. With all the fuel drained out of our tank, replacing it is just as simple as before. Before throwing fresh fuel in and trying to start this thing up, we still have to fix this electric start that doesn't work at all. Over the years, I've learned that a lot of the times when the e-start doesn't work on these Yamaha bikes, it's almost always either the fuse on the solenoid or the starter solenoid itself. I've noticed that this issue is actually so common that I've started stocking these starter solenoids in my toolbox, so that way when I get a bike that doesn't run, I always have one on hand. The battery on this bike was also super old and didn't hold a charge, so we threw a new one of those on as well. Finally, the last thing that I want to do before we try to start this bike up is fix this throttle tube, because it's driving me nuts. As you can see, the old one is busted up and the new one looks super fresh. Throttle tube replacement is another simple fix that you should familiarize yourself with, because this happens more than you think, and it's a lot more simple than you would think, so check this out. There are only 2 screws holding this throttle housing together, so once we have those removed, we can go ahead and split this case and work this thing out. The end of this cable has the exact same configuration as what we've already removed and replaced at the carburetor, so simply work it out, and then you can slide your throttle tube off the handlebars. Before just throwing the new one on, there's a couple things we need to do. First, I like to throw some grease down in the new throttle slide so that we know it's going to have no issues rotating around this handlebar. Additionally, make sure you wipe down any dust or mud that's caked up on your handlebar so that you can minimize the risk of this issue popping back up in the future. Now simply reattach both of your throttle cables, reposition this housing so that your 2 screw holes line back up, reinstall both your top and bottom screw, being sure not to over tighten either one of them. Then finally test both the throw and return of your throttle to make sure that it's correct. With our throttle situation completely fixed and working correctly, it's now time to make these bars look good with a fresh set of Pro Taper grips. First, I removed this old crusty grip by simply slicing down the middle with a razor blade and pulling it off the handlebars. After doing so, take a cleaner of your choice and wipe down all this dust and mud that's built up in the inside of this grip. Once the bar has been thoroughly cleaned and fully dried off, we can go ahead and reinstall our new grip. Two simple tricks I use when installing new grips is making a slice in the end of the new grip with a razor blade, as well as spraying some spray paint down in the grip before sliding it onto the bike. Putting a slit in the grip helps air that would be inside fighting against you when pushing onto the bar to escape out the back side of the grip. Additionally, spraying paint down in the grip acts as a great replacement when you don't have grip glue handy. Once the paint dries, it acts just like a glue and holds these things to the bars, and I have never had an issue when I've done this. Swapping out grips is a super simple change, but it makes a huge difference in how a buyer will feel when they sit on and test ride your bike. Now with these fresh parts, fresh battery, and fresh fuel in the bike, we can go ahead and try to start this thing up. And let me go ahead and tell you, I was blown away with how easy this thing started. Now that our bike is running great, we need to make them cosmetics match and make this thing look a lot better than it does right now. Taking just a couple extra minutes to make sure that your bike looks great before it goes live on Marketplace makes all the difference in how easy it sells and how much buyers are willing to pay for it. As you can see in these close-up shots, a lot of the plastics on this bike are faded as the previous owner let it sit outside. Thankfully, we have the perfect product to help make this bike look a lot better. My absolute go-to for a product that will shine bikes up is Maxima SC1. This detail spray is basically an aerosol silicone, so once you spray it over the bike, it gives it a nice gloss and helps rehydrate those dried out plastics. This stuff also makes an amazing tire shine. Just take a look at the part we have sprayed versus the part we didn't. And if you get a little too heavy with your spray like I did right here and leave some streaks, no worries, it buffs right off. And now, once you have the bike sprayed down, you'll end up with results that look just like this. With our transformation complete, I took some nice pictures of this bike, threw it on Facebook Marketplace for $2,300, and after just a week, we had a buyer for this bike and sold it for $2,200. And for a quick price breakdown on this flip, we purchased this bike for $700, invested roughly $100 in the new battery, starter solenoid, and supplies for cleaning the bike, which leaves us with a total profit on this flip of $1,400. This is still just the beginning of all the flips you're going to see on this channel, so if you want to see more content like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and like this video if you enjoyed it. I also already have many other flipping videos uploaded, so if you want to see those, make sure you check out the channel.